If anyone would like to speak tonight, please remember to fill out a speaker card. It's in the back of the room. Thank you.
Welcome to the City Council meeting of April 7th, 2014. I'm reporting about the closed session that we had earlier. We consulted with labor negotiators around the employee organizations of SEIU and AFFA, and also consulted with legal counsel around the 2 lawsuits against the City of Albany. And now we will proceed with the joint powers meeting and have our roll call.
Board Member Atkinson.
Present.
Board Member Barnes.
Present.
Board Member Moss.
Here.
Vice Chair Weil.
Here.
And Chair Thompson. Consent calendar. Consent calendar.
Okay, there's no items on the consent calendar.
JPA, yes, there's minutes and the resolution.
Oh, the minutes, thank you.
And the resolution hiring the new finance director.
Okay. Any comments from the city council members? Members of the public? Okay, back to the city council for a motion.
I move that we accept the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Okay,
Board Member Atkinson.
Aye.
Board Member Barnes.
Aye.
Board Member Moss.
Aye.
Vice Chair Weil.
yes. And then new business?
New business, resolution number JPA 2014-3, accepting the Public Works Organizational Study, recommendations and modifications to job classification. Staff recommendation that the board, 1, adopt resolution number JPA 2014-3, accepting the Public Works Organizational Study, recommendations and modifications to job classifications. 2, direct the city manager to implement the recommended action plan as part of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2014-15 and within the availability of funding resources.
Okay, shall we hear the report?
Yes, giving the report is Ray Chan, our Public Works Director.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Tonight we are going to do a presentation of the Public Works Organization Study. What I have tonight is Mr. Stan Feathers from City Gate and Associate.
Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, or Madam Vice Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
Council members, thank you so much for this opportunity to present this item tonight. I believe I do have a PowerPoint presentation that just a second to kind of talk a little bit about Citygate, the consulting firm that you hired to do this organization operational study. We're a little bit of a unique firm in that the firm is primarily composed of retired senior managers. So when you hire Citygate, you get a staff of professionals that have kind of walked the walk. The staff that we had working on this project, as far as the Citygate project team, was myself, who, with 30 years of public sector experience, everything from budget manager to a finance director to an assistant city manager and city manager. The project team from Citygate also included a former public works director who was public works director for 3 different cities, and a former HR director. So we felt that we put together a really good team to kind of work with your staff on this project. The item you have before you is asking for you to basically accept the Citygate report, to accept the modifications to the classifications within the Public Works Department as proposed within the Citygate report, which I'll spend a little time covering as we get through the presentation, and to direct the city manager to implement the action plan related to the study, obviously within the availability of funding for next year's proposed budget. With that, I'd like to go ahead and go through my presentation. The scope of the project was to perform an independent third-party evaluation of the Public Works Department, primarily the operation and the organizational structure, to identify any facets of the organization that could be improved over time. Although the scope of the study did not include looking at the overall finances of the department, we did spend some time doing a remedial analysis because, obviously when you recommend actions to a city council, you want to be able to fund them at least within the existing budget constraints. Part of the focus of the study was to identify and to develop some policy and organizational strategies and alternatives for the organization. As far as the approach to the study, typically the first thing that we do is compose a list of documentation and policies, procedures, a variety of documents that the city has that we want to evaluate and review. So we gave the city or the department and the city a huge list of documents. They provided us with those documents. Some of the documents, as far as the budgets, the financial statements, were available on the website, and we were able to get those ourselves. So that was kind of the first step. Before we ever do any interviews, we basically do the research on the city, on the department. We met with the city-assigned staff as far as the project manager, spent a considerable amount of time in dialogue over the term of the project with your Public Works Director, Ray Chen. He was extremely professional and devoted a significant amount of resources to the project too. And we could not have came up with the recommendations that we did without his help and assistance, and actually the assistance of the department too, and senior management, obviously. We interviewed the staff, we interviewed the former city manager, interviewed the interim city manager at that time, and a variety of other department heads with that were related stakeholders. We conducted a walkthrough of the city facilities to get a feel for the physical issues related to the infrastructure within the organization. We reviewed the policies, procedures. Once we got through that endeavor, we looked at some potential organizational alternatives so that might work within the organization, provided those findings to the city and public works staff, refined those findings, and we are presenting that action plan tonight. As far as the areas of emphasis, the things that we really looked at were workflow, workload planning, the business processes within the organization, how the organization got the work done. We looked at any standard operating guidelines or procedures that the department used for that organizational backbone. We wanted to understand their project management approach and review any performance objectives, review any performance monitoring, and look at issues associated with workload and improvement processes and corrective action planning that the department might do. we found that the department had some interesting dynamics. New leadership. We reviewed the previous citywide organizational study that split Public Works off from the Community Development Department. We looked at some of the impacts in terms of reduced staffing related to the 2008 meltdown that really every city in California has been dealing with, probably to a lesser degree the coastal and more highly urbanized areas that seem to be making a little bit of a comeback. We also thought that Albany had some kind of interesting dynamics because of their reliance on existing infrastructure and the fact that there weren't a lot of annexations and what looked like to us was new development activity. And when you have a city that is a little bit more of an aging city, they have some particular infrastructure issues that cities that are kind of building out don't have. And, you know, just Albany's a beautiful city. You know, it really is. We wanted to look at kind of next step alternatives associated with, you know, how we could improve the performance of the department and what could be done. I won't spend a lot of time on, you know, primary departmental missions. This city council understands what the missions of the department are. City facilities, infrastructure, design, engineering, construction, full maintenance function, whether it's done in-house or done in an outsourced capacity, which really every public works department does some of the other. Regulatory coordination, which actually, you know, sounds simple in a way, or like a small piece of things, but is increasingly becoming more complex over time and requiring a more significant amount of public works time and can be a potentially a very high cost, high risk, high liability issue for many cities. One of the things that's kind of interesting about a public works department is that, you know, cities are diverse in and of themselves. You know, I mean, when you have, you know, a fire department, a police department, a community development department, a recreation and parks department, who all are direct service providers to the community. And then you have a variety of central service departments, city manager, personnel, HR, finance, some of the other risks, some of the other functions that really provide, or the kind of the inner workings of that organizational wheel, which provide indirect services to all the organizations. Of all those, public works departments is probably the most diverse. Its workload can be extremely technical, obviously managerial, administrative, operational. It's more than any other department, it's typically a blend of in-house and consultant services. And a lot of those consultant services are highly technical engineering services. This was a slide that I put up just to kind of give a sense of the financing structure of this department, which is very typical of most departments. I'm kind of a little pleased to see that 27% of it's funded by general fund as far as the streets component, because street maintenance is, you know, it's one of those critical backbone infrastructure maintenance issues that can tend to go by the wayside. What this doesn't talk about really is the raw dollar numbers. This is just a snapshot of some organizations to kind of, we wanted to get a feel for, with respect to in-house staff in terms of looking at what, you know, staffing levels. Not necessarily the question of overstaffing, understaffing, but to just basically kind of do a thumbnail sketch of what this department looks like to compared to other. And I think what you can kind of draw from this is that the department probably uses a significant amount of consulting help, and you probably already knew that. I think you probably did. This is the picture of the organization currently, which is a extremely flat organization. And, I think as public policymakers, we kind of love flat, Flat can be construed as being very good, but sometimes that flatness can really provide a level of ineffectiveness that you have to look at. And a lot of times you can sustain a very flat organization over time, but ultimately you'll experience some significant problems if you do that. And we'll talk about some of those problems and issues as we go through this. We came up with 8 primary recommendations. And we'll spend a little time on going through those recommendations. I think some of them are very critical recommendations. Some of them are recommendations actually that are related to each other. Most all of these recommendations are Public Works, American Public Works Association best practices. And that's one of the things we kind of looked at as a benchmark for this study was, are these best practices? And because I think that's where most cities want to go, and that's one of the things that is telling. The first recommendation was review and update all job descriptions. That's when we looked at the job descriptions going in, it was pretty evident to me, and actually talking to Ray too, and our HR director, that these things need to be updated. A lot of the job descriptions hadn't been changed when the Public Works was actually split off from community development. And not to say that I'm not pointing fingers at all on that, because people are extremely busy in every organization, but job descriptions need to reflect the current assignments of individuals. You cannot evaluate an individual's performance with the job description as the primary guideline for what they do without having an up-to-date job description. So that's critical. And it's not fair to employees either. You look at it from a supervisory perspective and say, I need a good solid job description so I can define what this employee should be doing. Well, the employee needs that too. It's an issue, and it's also an issue of continuity within the organization. Job descriptions are something that we should be looking at all the time. Organizations change and evolve. And when those organizations and the duties that you're requiring that individual to work in within the organization change, you should also change the job description. A lot of times employees think, okay, you change my job description, that means more money. That's not necessarily the case. What it means is you're doing something different than you were previously. And by updating those job descriptions, you get away from the issue of having employees that are working out of their classification, which is really not a best practice at all. Those job descriptions are part of this package and are proposed for being amended and updated tonight. Strengthen the employee performance evaluation and standard operating procedures, standard operating guidelines, whatever the organization wants to call them. Employees need feedback. They also need to hear what is expected of them in any organization. They need to be able to understand that. That needs to be communicated with them, and it needs to be communicated up and down the chain of command in any organization to be effective. Communicating those performance expectations is critical. You can't expect to have a high performance organization unless you communicate within that organization and people understand what they need to be doing on that job to be successful and to meet the objectives of the organization. And that means we all got to be pulling in the same direction. And, you know, I always used to tell my staff, I am never successful without the success of my staff. I don't do anything by myself, and organizations don't do anything by themselves. It's a team effort, and that means from a performance expectation perspective that you need consistency. You need to be absolutely candid with people. If there's a corrective action issue, you need to communicate it. Then you need to figure out a plan and a strategy so that you can fix the problem, so that the organization can be successful and the employee can be successful. Now, you know, 90% of the time that works out. Maybe 99% of the time, the 1% of the time it doesn't work out, then you have to deal with it from a personnel management perspective. Fairness, consistency over the organization is critical if you want to have good organizational performance. That's got to be a collaborative effort with the personnel department, with HR. And one of the reasons that's critical is because this is a city. It's a corporation, and the Public Works Department is not an isolated department. People in the Public Works Department need to be treated in the same consistent framework as other individuals within the organization. So you can't look at it in an isolated manner. That's why working with your HR department is so critical, because it's got to be applied consistently over the organization. We looked at the organizational structure, had a lot of dialogue on it. We looked at a variety of different issues we thought existed within the organization. It was pretty obvious to us that the span of control issue was a big deal. I mean, it was the most critical piece. And it was, tell the truth, it was probably the most problematic for the director. Although I would actually argue that it was very problematic for the staff members that were being supervised, because a lot of stuff I just talked about. Employees need guidance. They need attention. They are our most important and expensive resource. So you just can't let them go out there. If they need guidance, they need career development. They need to be mentored over time. You need to look after their growth and development as an employee. You need to train people. So, you know, when you have an extremely flat organizational structure, that's compounded by the fact that the Public Works Director has all of these extremely technical and managerial responsibilities within the organization. It simply becomes an issue of there's just not enough time in the day. So that was one of the problems we had. And until you can deal with that span of control issue, you can't enhance and look at, expect good employee accountability. Also, one of the other issues was that, you know, there's no chain of command in the organization. You know, that's one of the problems with a flat organization. If the Public Works Director wins the lottery tomorrow and walks off the job, and the council says, I've got a problem with this huge infrastructure issue, and calls the city manager, and the city manager, they have no one to call. That's a problem. Because you need succession planning in a healthy organization. You need to have, you know, a number two or a couple of number twos, and you need to be developing those individuals over time. And to tell the truth, when a lot of the functions are being done by consultants, and I'm not putting on consultants, I'm one right now myself, but you don't get that from a consulting service. We recommended modifications to the organization that would sort of provide a, okay, I think I just did something here. Second level of, oh, okay, I got it back now. A second tier of supervision on the technical side and on the project management side. But really, to tell the truth, the most critical piece of this is on the maintenance side. Because you really need your maintenance group really needs, and I'm not saying they need supervision, they're all pretty darn competent people out there that are talented and skilled, as a lot of the people in the Public Works Department are. But they need to be told what they're doing right. They need to have, the work needs to be scheduled and planned and adhered to, and the performance needs to be observed, and which will kind of lead to some of the next slides that we're going to talk about. Modifying the organization, what are you going to get out of it? Increased emphasis on city infrastructure. And, city infrastructure is one of those invisible things, but the best cities have great infrastructure, and you can't let that infrastructure deteriorate over time. I know I'm speaking to the choir, but it's kind of invisible. But the problem is, it's you pay me now or you pay me later. Ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure. I mean, I could just keep on going on forever. And putting those preventive maintenance dollars into your infrastructure in an effective way, and knowing what components of the infrastructure needed, I mean, that's critical, because they can represent huge dollar figures if they're left to deteriorate to a large degree. Improve the department's analytical capacity. You're going to make so much money by having an analyst in this department, because you can't expect the Public Works Director to do all that. It's just too much. And kind of takes that individual away from the big picture perspective too, which is really a big part of that position's leadership role in the community. Technical capacity, institutional knowledge, that's kind of a big word in a way, but it's really critical. You hire consultants and they may do a fantastic job for you, but when you don't build institutional knowledge and understanding within the organization, and someone in that consulting firm moves to a new job, you lose all that, and you don't, by not having it within your organization, that individual can't spread that institutional knowledge within the organization either. So you kind of lose a big piece of that.
Excuse me, we have a rather long agenda tonight. I wonder if you could summarize the remaining pieces of this report?
Absolutely.
Thank
I will
you.
do so very rapidly. And I apologize. I'm a little bit passionate about some of this stuff. And review the equipment and technology. That's important from a employee safety perspective. Also from a maintenance and preservation perspective. Implement a performance measurement program, kind of goes with the next slide, which is evolving your work order system and developing a master maintenance schedule. These all kind of go to the principle that you need to measure performance of the organization. And as you measure performance of the organization and understand what's working right and not working right, you can do corrective action and improve the performance of an organization. Item 8 was evaluating the concept of an internship program over time, which many departments do and can be a very effective organizational strategy. With that, I think I've probably covered most of these conclusions and observations on the organization. And next steps, as we see it, would be accept the report, conceptually improve the recommendations, direct the city manager to implement the recommendations within funding constraints, and at some point return to council at a later date with progress reports. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council might have.
Members of the council? Michael?
I got a quick one. You had an early slide that showed staff to residents ratios in three cities, Emeryville, El Cerrito, and Albany. Emeryville is quite a bit denser and more urban and more commercial than Albany. So for these various cities, is there sort of a benchmark standard that we should be trying to apply or we should consider applying?
You know, that is a great question. It's extremely difficult to do over time. You know, you made a really great observation on the density issues, the topography, the geography, the urban mix. It's kind of difficult to make that, you know, because another thing is you don't know what the best practices are like within that organization. You don't know how new their infrastructure is, and that's why this measuring the performance internally and then utilizing that information to do comparisons that are really more comparisons in terms of ratios. You know, like in the case of a simple one would be looking at for maybe a three-man crew doing potholes, how long it takes you to basically repair a pothole over time, how many you can do in an 8-hour day. And looking at those from a more of an industry standard perspective is really a more effective approach. You don't have a lot of data currently available, but the staff are trying with the work order system, and that will need to evolve over time. Then you'll be able to ask some of those really more important business performance questions. I hope that kind of answers that.
And just one more. The internship idea is intriguing. I'm a little confused, though. Would that be internships for desk jobs here, or would this be internships going out with maintenance workers?
No, it's, wow, that's a great question, too. I have to say I'm a huge advocate of internships because I was a graduate intern many, many years ago when I was doing my master's in public administration. And I have kind of championed internship relationships between cities my whole career, and they can be everything from graduate students in business or public administration to engineering students. And in fact, one of my last positions, we basically had a internship program with one of the UCs, and they provided us with an intern team of engineers to come up with some alternatives to a couple of issues we were having related to our wastewater treatment plant. And so it can be in many avenues, you know, there can be many avenues. The first place to start is with, like for Public Works would be the head of the engineering department, you know, and you can kind of take as many as you can get typically, but they do require some time because it has to be it has to be good for them and it has to be good for the city. I can tell you that when I was an intern way back when, and it was actually for a county administrator's office, county chief executive's office, they really got their money's worth out of me, you know, and you can get your money's worth out of an internship too. And the other thing is you need really good people in the public sector. A lot of times you can get somebody in that's really good and they'll end up wanting to pursue the career in that area, so.
Peter?
A quick one, a little more far field, and this might be more of a question for Ray. You mentioned that you toured our major public works facilities. Perhaps the big public works facility that's coming up is the one we haven't built yet, but is in now process of design and development. I'm wondering if there's been any interplay between the organizational study and how this might affect the plans for the new.
So you're talking about the maintenance center?
Yeah.
Well, Ray can answer it if he wants to. We have talked about it, and I've seen the site and the existing site.
Yes, in short, to answer your question is yes. Actually, the organizational reorganization of Public Works and the new Public Works Center, they work, together. In order to support, a bigger crew, more people, we need to have a more functional facility. And with the new Public Works Center, we need to have people to fill it in. Otherwise, it will be all empty. It will defeat the purpose.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, members of the public. All right, back to the city council. Their motion.
I appreciate having this study because with our history in Albany, with having been in the same department, this huge Department of Public Works and Community Development, with dividing it up, I think this is a great opportunity to find out what we need to improve, and that'll be better for everybody, the whole city, and things that we need to get done. So anyway, I think it sounds great.
You want to make a motion?
I have to go back to my computer that I'm getting used to here. So I recommend, if I can find it again here. Oops,
I can do it if you like.
different spot.
Okay. I'd like to move adoption of resolution number JPA 2014-3, accepting the Public Works Organizational Study recommendations and modifications to job classifications, and with that, direct the city manager to implement the recommended action plan as part of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2014-15 and within the availability of funding resources.
Is there a second?
Sure, I'll second.
Okay. Take a vote.
Board Member Atkinson?
Aye.
Board Member Barnes?
Aye.
Board Member Moss?
Aye.
Vice Chair Watt?
Yes. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. We will now adjourn the meeting of the Joint Powers Authority, and thank you so much for your presentation. And this will be the beginning of the City Council meeting for April 7th, and we will begin with the roll call.
Councilmember Atkinson?
Present.
Councilmember Barnes?
Present.
Councilmember Moss?
Here.
Vice Mayor Weil?
Here,
Mayor
and
Thompson.
Ray Chan will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. We did not have a closed session, and so we'll move on to the consent calendar.
Report on closed
We did have a
session.
close
I reported earlier on the closed session we had at 6:30.
Consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendation will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the City Council. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or a member of the audience requests removal of the items from the consent calendar.
Okay. Any items that the members of the City Council would like pulled?
I have several questions, but the one I would pull would be 4-12, just a question about the police utility vehicle purchase, and I think there's also something in here about a fire vehicle that we're leasing, and I'm curious as to why we're leasing one and purchasing another.
Okay, I believe it has to do with grant money. So you're also pulling 4-7, so we can answer the question about both those things.
Yeah.
Other items? Michael, anything from you? Marge, do you remember what it was about? Okay, 4-6, so 4-6, 4-7, and 4-12. Members of the public, any items to be pulled? Okay. Back to 4-6, Marge.
There's anyway, great reasoning for doing a lot of the streets, and I was just really interested in the process of sort of why we're doing this, the sort of switching the original, and also they had some really interesting things about the disability type ramps, how those are different than what we have right now. I was interested in that difference. If you could just sort of talk about what we're going to be doing, just sort of want an overview. I don't know who's going to do it.
Yes, absolutely. The handicap ramps is the first step before we do any street work. This is a typical way of doing a street pavement project. The first thing we always do is to check the curb and gutter. The curb ramp, which is part of the curb and gutter, we always check it and make sure the condition meets the pavement condition so that we can set the elevation, and it's going to help us to set the elevation of the pavement project. The reason we have to do the curb ramp first is this is one of the requirements that we have to do. This is from the federal law that we have to make sure we have adequate access for the handicapped persons. So this is always part of the project, and this is typical.
This is different than what we were doing before, which were just sort of making cuts. Now I've noticed there's bumps and there's other. Is this the new way? Is that what they're talking about when they talk about the new ramps?
Oh, are you talking about just the ramps or the pavement?
Well, the way that you seemed to me like we had old ramps that you had to go toward the center, and now we have things that are a little easier to access.
Oh, I see. Yes. Yes. This is one of the things that we are trying to make it more efficient and effective for the handicapped people. Probably in Albany in the old days, we would just cut the ramp whenever that convenient. But nowadays, what we are doing is we really put a lot of thinking, a lot of engineering design before we do each curb ramps. The whole idea is, number one, is cost saving. The second reason is because we want to comply with the rules and regulations so that it will be effectively being used rather than we just arbitrarily pick a location.
Okay.
So then I noticed that the recommendation by the consultants was like slurry and a different kind of pavement than something that costs more. And I noticed that there's a lot more streets that he can do at this point, to use the money up. So anyway, I thought that the consultant seemed like they did a really good job. But are you checking the streets? Because it does seem to me there are a lot of streets that have been paved or done stuff that hopefully they're not on this list so that we're not redoing stuff, but maybe there are things that have to be fixed. I don't know. But
You're absolutely right. One of the requirements from the city to the consultant is we want to make the available funding to maximize the amount of street. The original report back several years ago when the city hired a consultant to do the original survey, we had about 7 to 8 streets that they're supposed to do, but in this project, we are expanding to 21 locations. So what we're trying to do is we are using a combination of different methods with the new technology so that we can really stretch the dollar. We try to cover a lot of streets. Although some of the streets that maybe when you drive on the road, how come we are not covering it? Because one of the reasons is we're looking at the PCI, the Pavement Condition Index. There are certain roads, if it is under certain conditions, it really costs a lot of money to fix it right now. So we were thinking we had a lot of discussion with the consultant. It's like, do we want to just take the available funding to do a few streets, or do we want to stretch the dollar right now to cover 21 streets? So the decision from Public Works to the consultant was, let's do more streets right now. And then the other streets that is way below the PCI that we can fix right now, we are going to apply for further grant funds so that we can have more money in the pot, then we can go back and fix it.
Okay,
thank you.
good, thank you. Okay, item 4.7, Lance. Or do you, okay.
Actually, I'll go ahead and speak to 4.7 and 4.12.
That's great.
Yeah, okay.
4.7
economic.
is the lease of the fire command staff vehicle, and 4.12 is the purchase of police marked patrol cars. And the reason for the different funding is on the fire side, the equipment replacement reserves are not significant, and we don't want to, with this one purchase, draw down or even go
Deplete.
negative, depending upon how the case may be, those funds. So treating it as an operating lease at this point seemed to be the best alternative. With the police vehicles, we do have grant funds available through the COPS grant, and they're required to be encumbered before the end of the year. So this purchase, doing it as a purchase, made sense.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there a motion here about the consent calendar?
I move we accept the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Councilmember Atkinson,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Moss,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Weil.
Yes. Okay, consent calendar passes. We'll move on to the presentation.
Proclamation celebrating National Library Week 2014.
I'm asking Councilmember Marge Atkinson to present this since she's a current teacher for the Albany School District.
If I could meet the library representatives. Anybody who'd like to join us is welcome to. Don't be shy. Come on over. This is a proclamation celebrating National Library Week of 2014, and it is Lives Change at Your Library. Whereas libraries help lives change in their communities, campuses, and schools, and whereas librarians work to meet the changing needs of their communities, including providing resources for everyone and bringing services outside of library walls, and whereas libraries and librarians bring together community members to enrich and shape the community and address local issues, and whereas librarians are trained, tech-savvy professionals, yes, providing technology training and access to downloadable content like ebooks, and whereas libraries offer programs to meet community needs, providing residents with resume writing classes, homework help, and financial planning services to teens applying for student loans, to older adults planning their retirement, and whereas libraries continuously grow and evolve in how they provide for the needs of every member of their communities, and whereas libraries, librarians, library workers, and supporters across America are celebrating National Library Week. Now therefore be it resolved that the Albany City Council hereby proclaims National Library Week, April 13th through 19th, 2014. We encourage all residents to visit the library this week to take advantage of the wonderful library resources available at your library. So thank you so much. And there you go. Okay, thank my new kitty. Thank you for being here.
Thank you all for this proclamation. I appreciate it. And thank you for your recognition and support of the Albany Library. Just so I can mention one of the ways that we're celebrating National Library Week next week is taking food for fines. And so if you know anybody out there that's got outstanding library fines, they can pay for it in food donations, and then that can go to help support the Alameda County Food Pantry. So I left some information in the back, and I thank you for your support again, and appreciate everything that you all do to support the library.
Thanks so much, Deb. Also want to remind people that our newest program at the library is Pause to Read, Thursday, 4 to 5 p.m. And we've had 14 children so far who've read to certified dogs, and this actually improves their reading scores. So please let people know about that program.
The dogs?
PAWS.
Correct. I don't know, we haven't tested the dogs yet, but that might be. Next item.
Get to the city public forum announcement for a person desiring to address the city council on an item that's not on the agenda. Please note that city policy limit each speaker up to 3 minutes. The mayor may reduce the time limit per speaker depending on the number of speakers. The Brown Act limits the council's ability to take in or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff for comments or to a future agenda. All person wishing to speak on an item on the agenda are to fill out speaker card and provide it to me. Speaker cards are in the back.
Is there a first
You can
speaker?
go ahead.
Kim?
Members of the council, you already know this, but it's 39 days until Relay for Life by the American Cancer Society. We need more teams, we need more sponsors, we need more participants. As of today, we have 11 teams. We just got another one last night. Beth Pollard got the Rotary started. We have 40 participants and have raised $4,493. You know this, but I wanted to announce to the community that we have decided to dedicate this year's relay to Jewel Okawachi, former mayor, Judy Lieberman, the assistant city manager, and Steve Foss, one of our police officers who all unfortunately passed away due to cancer this year. I urge all of you to consider dedicating a luminaria that we will line the track with. There are $10 donations to do that. You can do that in the memory. And in addition, we are going to start a canned food drive in order to weigh down the luminaria. Excuse me. Got a lot of food drives going. And so if any of you have canned food that you are willing to give to us, we'd love it. You could bring it to the relay, or you could bring it to me anytime you see me. And I just wanted you all to remember that each lap brings us closer to a world with more birthdays. Thank you.
Could you say the dates one more time?
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, that's a good idea. It's May 17th and 18th, and I have some flyers. That if you would pass them to people that don't know about it, we'd love it. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Catherine Sutton, Albany resident. I have a concern about the library that the books which they used to put outside for the people, for the public to sort through and take home are no longer, I understand they're going directly to Fremont, and those books, many of them are being trashed. As a recipient of some of those books, Transition Albany Library has many useful how-to books which are now no longer available to us, and some of the books that were thrown away were not even irrelevant, they were very relevant, just old. I also have a letter here which I'm not going to read out, I actually am going to email it to you, but it's asking about what's happening with the people at the Bulb, because I understand that once the emergency shelter goes away, which it was planned to do in May, everyone else is supposed to have gone, and clearly we need more time. My letter says a little more, and I only brought one copy, so you'll get it in an email, or maybe the city will copy it for you. But we really need to know what's going on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Amber Whitson, Albany resident, and much shorter than Catherine. I'm like, Mayor, well, Vice Mayor and Council, and City Manager and City Attorney and everybody else. In a 2012 report from the Department of Justice and the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, decriminalization of homelessness in the United States is recognized as a potential violation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. It's the first time that any domestic agency has recognized any domestic practice as a treaty violation. Sure, Albany is, for now, able to say that their town is not without a shelter for the homeless. But given the fact that Albany has been pouring CDBG funds into capital improvements to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars per fiscal year, and the fact that for at least the past 7 years, Albany has paid a little under $2,000 into Alameda County's in-home HMIS homeless database, and that until last year, Albany had neglected its obligation as a member of Alameda County's Homeless Continuum of Care to enter data about their homeless population into that database, Albany cannot honestly say that they even attempted to provide shelter that would be accessible to their homeless population. Because you didn't. One doesn't have to devote time to studying the population experiencing homelessness on the Albany Bulb to see that our community has special mental and physical health needs. You did not design a shelter with Bulb residents in mind. That shelter was designed to make you look good. It serves you right, but it did not make you look good. It serves the community on the Bulb wrong that we were unable to use it, even when we tried. The UN Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing, Ms. Raquel Rolnick, stated that where settlements pose risks to environmental resources like coastlines, parks, lakes, rivers, and wetlands, She suggested that states consult the populations concerned and ensured their genuine participation to explore options to protect both the environment and the tenure, security, and livelihoods of inhabitants.
Okay. Can I ask you to bring your comments to a close?
Excuse me, thank you. Participatory land readjustment and incremental upgrading of settlements along water bodies, including improved sanitation and waste disposal services, can address both concerns. She also gave states some guiding principles on security of tenure for the urban poor. She said that security of tenure enables one to live in one's home in security, peace, and dignity, and it is an integral part of the right to adequate housing and a necessary ingredient for the enjoyment of many other civil, cultural, economic, political, and social rights. Individuals and communities occupying land or property to fulfill their right to adequate housing and who have no other adequate option have legitimate tenure rights that should be secured and protected. Now, I know you guys could care less about human rights and UN and all that, but really think about those things and maybe look at those reports, because I think some can really apply in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. All right. We'll go on then to the next item.
New business, memorandum of understanding between City of Albany and Albany Firefighters Association. Staff recommendation that council adopt resolution number 2014-35, a resolution of the Albany City Council approving the memorandum of understanding between the City of Albany and Albany Firefighters Association.
You have in front of you the staff report that describes some of the background, a little bit of the analysis, and the items that were changed in the new memorandum of understanding. Also attached are some pages that have the exact text taken from the new MOU, memorandum of understanding. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay. Members of the City Council? Oh. Michael, anything from you? No questions. Members of the public? Okay. Is there a motion from the City Council?
Oh, I'll do it this time. I move that the council adopt resolution number 2014-35, a resolution of the Albany City Council approving the memorandum of understanding between the City of Albany and the Albany Firefighters Association.
I'll second that.
Vote?
Councilmember Atkinson?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Weil?
Yes. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Next item. Thanks, Aaron.
Sustainability Committee analysis of options to fund implementation of the Albany Climate Action Plan. Staff recommendation that the council, one, review the Climate Action Plan funding proposal submitted to City Council by the City Sustainability Committee, and two, provide direction to staff and the Sustainability Committee regarding any next steps associated with the possibility of pursuing a Climate Action Plan funding measure on the ballot. 3, provide direction to staff to incorporate Climate Action Plan funding in the forthcoming 2014 City Budget Review session, tentatively scheduled for June 2014 council meeting.
Good evening, Madam Vice Mayor, members of the council. The Sustainability Committee has submitted a proposal for funding the Climate Action Plan. They identified 4 possible funding strategies, including grants, volunteer donations, a new parcel tax, and an increase in the utility users tax. I'd like to introduce committee members Tom Cooper and Janet Smithheimer, who are here to present that proposal.
Thank you.
Hi, Vice Mayor and council members. Janet is going to speak to this specifically, but we are the immediate past chair and vice chair of the Sustainability Committee, and we were on the committee, or chairing and vice chairing the committee, when the CAP was developed and approved by City Council, and these proposals were developed. So I'm going to turn it over to Janet in a second, but we feel very strongly about doing something more than nothing, because if you look at our report and the staff's report, without really having done anything, we will meet the targets, assuming nothing else really changes in the city. And you all are, I'm sure, aware of the UN report that came out last week about climate change that indicated that things are getting worse more quickly than had been anticipated. So our targets that we developed back in 2010 may no longer really be as effective as we thought they were. So we are looking at various measures to exceed the cap targets and at least do something more to involve the city. So that's what the two things that we're going to talk about tonight are about. So anyway,
Thank you,
Janet.
Tom.
Thank you. Good evening. And I guess Tom forgot to mention, we're the past chair and vice chair respectively, but the current chair and vice chair are both, I think, on spring break. So here we are. You have us.
We're pleased to have you here.
Just a few quick remarks about the proposal to increase Albany's utility user tax. Basically, our proposal is to ask you to consider placing on the ballot a measure that would take our utility tax from 7% to 9%. Just by way of a little bit of background, we started as a committee looking at this through a subcommittee several years ago, I believe at your request originally. And the idea at the time and still today is to look at a potential funding source in a modest amount to try to augment city revenue streams so that there can be a dedicated stream to address some of the cap initiatives. There are a number of initiatives. We're not going to talk about them in detail tonight. I know you've had several presentations recently on their progress, but we have a ways to go. As Tom mentioned, our committee has been looking at we did our own little inventory update to sort of see how are we doing as a city relative to the goal adopted in 2007. That appears in the report that you received. And basically, because of a lot of state and regional initiatives, it looks like Albany might get to its goal that you adopted, which was lowering our emissions in 2020 to 25% below what they were in 2004. But it's close, we're not sure, and it's a rough estimate that we've been making. And I think the other point to make there is that, beyond what Tom mentioned, that doesn't really allow for any increase in total demand, such as building out some of the projects that we're thinking about, and also increasing employment, which I think a lot of us in this community would like to probably see over the long term. So if nothing else changes, we're probably going to make it. We probably should be doing a little more than that. We're not sure, and that's kind of the background. So a few months ago, a subcommittee of the Sustainability Committee started meeting again to look at this issue. They considered, and our whole committee considered, the four sources that Tom mentioned: grants, donations, parcel tax, and an increase to the UUT. And grants are ongoing thanks to our incredible staff that we all have, Jeff and Claire and others. You've had several reports on that. I believe our report includes a list of them. But they need matching grants sometimes, so that's one of the ways this fund could augment that. Donations we looked at, but didn't feel like that was really a good, reliable source. Parcel tax we looked at extensively a few years ago, and again during this update, and felt that there were a couple of reasons why that might not work as well as the UUT. So we concluded that the UUT was the recommendation we wanted to bring to you. To review briefly how we thought it could be used, the report mentions a few different ways to think about this fund. If you increased it from the current 7 to 9, we estimate it would raise about $200,000 a year. It's interesting to note that when we first looked at this a few years ago, it would have been $250,000, but our utility consumption of gas and electric has actually declined, and it will likely continue to because we're all working hard on this. And that leads me to one of the key advantages of doing this. It's tied directly to a climate action goal, and if it all goes well and we invest in some more initiatives, it will be sort of a self-cyclical process of declining over time. The report also mentions you could choose to frame the ballot measure with a sunset. The suggestion was made of even thinking about it in terms of sunsetting in 2020. I wanted to mention a couple of things. Again, there's a long list of initiatives we haven't really fully addressed yet, despite a lot of progress. The report left out some of our committee members' big wish list items, and the biggest one that we've talked about a lot in committee is this funding would go far towards trying to implement a major measure to reduce circulation around the city by car if we thought about implementing a shuttle similar to what Emory Go Round has. That runs on a budget of about, last time I looked, and I fund it because I own an office building there, about $350,000 a year. So if you think about generating a fund of $200,000, you could think about good seed money for even starting that kind of initiative, looping around the city, connecting to BART stations, transporting a lot of us around town and not driving. Let's see, you had asked our committee and all the commissions and committees to come to you in these proposals with some pros and cons. So just to summarize what we thought some of the pros were in this proposal, it's tied directly to the cap, as I mentioned, which sort of interacts with the goal of reducing energy consumption. It would equal about $1.74 a month on the average residential bill increase, or about just under $21 a year. So it's a very modest effect on the average utility bill for residents for households in Albany. On the commercial side, it would be a little higher because our commercial energy consumption is some larger consumers. So when you average that information from PG&E, it would be about $16.66 a month on average, leading to about $200. That works out to about $200 a year of an increase. Let's see. Another strong argument in favor is that we've checked with PG&E and they would administer this charge on our utility bill at no cost to the city. So that's also a really good benefit in terms of raising revenue. And I think I missed the last meeting, but I think we checked with the Marin group as well, and they also said they would do the same thing, right, if that moves forward. It could also be structured to exempt the PG&E CARE program, which is aimed at reducing cost to low-income households. So there's a way to structure this that you could reduce or exempt this increase, and it would not apply to those households, and it sort of aligns well. A couple of cons are that it would require 2/3 voter approval, so there would be a campaign necessary if this were placed on the ballot. And I think one other issue that you might hear some community comment from as well, and we wrestle with this a lot, is it's not really emission sensitive. What we're proposing is a 7 to 9% applied to both electric and natural gas, and these days electric is a little bit better on its emissions. Natural gas is the arena where higher emissions occur. And so we debate a lot, could we have a sort of variable tax rate or charge rate on each of those two? Checked with PG&E several times, and they said, no, that's really too hard for us to do right now. We can't do that in our billing, but we might get there in the future. And so that's one other thing to think about. And the report, I wanted to make one final comment. The report did not mention the range of surrounding cities, but just to put it in context, because I anticipate this might be a question, I looked these up again just before I came over here. Let's see. So we're at 7. El Cerrito's at 8 currently. Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco, and Alameda are all at 7.5. So El Cerrito's a little higher, and Richmond is at 10 currently. And if you look statewide in California, UUTs range from nothing to up to 11%. So we're right in the middle there. We're a little low compared to some of our surrounding cities. Just wanted to leave you with that thought where there's a little bit of room to grow.
Good, thank you.
That's it for my
Can you
presentation.
stay and we'll see what questions
Of course.
arise? Marge, you want to start?
Yeah, you answered the question about how much per month. $1.74 doesn't seem too bad. What's like the bill before you add 174?
So our report had a chart which had some updated PG&E information. Let's see if I can find it quickly. So the average current residential bill, according to PG&E, with our current 7%, is $93 a year. And this would add $20 a year to it.
Would you have any plans for campaigning for this tax if we voted for that?
Someone's to answer that.
Yeah, the Sustainability Committee would be part of the organizing the campaign, and there's another item on the agenda about an outreach plan that would also potentially be part of campaign.
Michael?
Oh, I have a bunch. But let's start with the first one. This is on page 2. You give 2 options for the UUT. One is charged on utility bills for electric and gas usage, and then the second bullet point says UUT is a percentage that is applied to the total utility bill. And forgive me, but I pay my bill online now, so I haven't seen a paper copy in years. So what's the difference between those two? I mean, what's on a utility bill besides gas and electricity?
Oh, there's telecommunications, and we're not proposing to charge on that.
So I don't see the difference between your 2 proposals then. Are they the same thing in effect?
Yeah, I wasn't the author of this, so I have to look. On page 2 of the summary, is that what you're referring to?
It's on analysis of options to fund implementation of CAP. That's what it, well, it's not there. Sorry. You know, when we have paper documents and online documents, it gets a little mixed up. It's actually in the staff report. I'm sorry. It's page 2 of 3 of the staff report.
Okay. I have it here. Let's see. No, I didn't print out the staff report.
Is it the bullet points on page 2?
Yeah, the bullet points. The difference between the first 2 bullet points. It's not a big deal. I mean, it's not worth spending more than another 30 seconds on, so.
I think the main point was just to, it might be not worded right if I can jump in here. I think the main point was just to point out that our usages are different. So there's been a lot of discussion, as I mentioned, about applying a different rate to each of the 2 columns.
We're at 7% now in this UUT. Is any of that money earmarked for anything? Or does it all go to the general fund?
I believe it all goes to the general fund.
Okay. This is the part I'm a little nervous about. You're asking us to earmark money, but you're really not telling us what it's going to go for. So what you going to do with it? I mean, my take on what we need to get natural gas consumption down in this town is better windows and more insulation. But when you have little bungalows like mine that were framed with 2x4s, there's only so much insulation you can cram in there. And then there's the commercial side. I'm presuming there's some fixes there as well. So I'm a little unclear as to, even if there was this revenue stream created, what would happen with it?
So this is a lot of discussion in our committee. We really are coming to you today to get further direction. We outlined 3 different ways that one could write the measure and outline how it would be spent. That's in the report. One way talks about listing projects, and there are a lot of projects that are still partially or unfunded in the CAP. So one example is that shuttle that I mentioned. Another way outlined in the report is to not outline what the measure would be funding, but none of us thought that was a wise idea. We're just trying to give a balanced view. And then a third way was to specify some projects from the CAP and some that might be not earmarked specifically per project, so that there's some flexibility over time as new grant opportunities come up. The city's been great and very opportunistic in a positive way about applying for grants, and this money can be used for matching grant funds. A perfect example is we funded you got a grant for the feasibility study to join the Marin Community Energy Association, and I don't know if you needed a match there, but you might have. So no, but there are a lot of, and we wouldn't have been able to anticipate that particular need a year ago. So we wanted direction from you. If you told our committee to outline a number of projects and some direction about your preference about what you'd like to see in terms of those styles of a complete list, a partial list, or some, with some flexibility, we'd be delighted to come back with that.
Our intent is also to seek community input around this issue, to see what kinds of things energize the community around particular types of activities, whether it's the electric shuttle that reduces some of the traffic going to the middle and the high school, or some way to get people to take more public transit, or to focus on reducing emissions from commercial and residential units through the problem with the amount of tax we're talking about, $200,000 a year, is not going to subsidize home improvement and energy efficiency projects. So this is the kind of thing we struggled with. It should be something that's visible to residents, that they can see their money, their tax dollars going to something that is going to make a difference. So that's why we, you know, as Janet said, we didn't come up with something specific, but whether it's the council and or the community that would come up with ideas, we think that would be part of generating the campaign for it.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, Peter?
Whole bunch of ideas and questions, but more specifically, let's just do a straight political thing. I think I'm generally in support of certainly of raising money to implement our greenhouse gas reduction goals, but the school district is talking about putting something on the ballot in 2014. The Alameda County Waste Management Board is coming up with a minor tweak to parcel taxes, which in part because of the way they did it is causing a lot of stink in other parts of the county. Was there any discussion about timing?
Oh, yeah. I don't know how much, and some of you weren't on council, but this matter was mentioned to some of you a few years back at another point in time during the recession when there were even more ballot measures, including our sales tax, and we were directed to drop the issue then because of the multiplicity of tax revenue measures. I mean, I think we're going to always have a few. And so our thinking was this was a good time in between, you know, it's not the presidential election, it's midterm. The economy's improved, depending on how you look at it, a lot or a little. This is a very, very modest increase. And I think we're kind of midterm in our process of trying to get to our cap measure. So it's also a really excellent time to take stock of where we are and develop some of these ideas for sort of taking ourselves to the next level. So we discussed this at great length, and we anticipated that you all might have some concern. The other thing we did do, but we did it more intensively the first time around, I think it got included in this report without much discussion, was that we actually asked the city clerk to pull all the tax measures that were revenue raising that the city has ever had, and we measured the, you know, how many of them passed versus failed, and I believe every single tax measure in Albany has passed with one exception that was then put back to the voters another time and passed the second
Right,
time.
we're pretty good about that.
We're very good about
And
it.
I did see that on in our staff report, the number of things that went back to, I think, the early 90s.
Yeah, exactly. I think I voted on all of them and was mainly keeping track, so I wanted to prove to myself if that was really the case.
Go ahead.
Right. Also, a bit of a follow-up. You mentioned that that if we had initiated this when we first adopted the goals, we would have gotten 250,000 because of we were just using more energy.
Our utility consumption.
This is, again, the waste management is facing the same issue about collecting or funding their household hazardous waste sites. It was funded on dumping fees. People are more sustainable. There's still household hazardous waste out there, and so they don't get the dumping fees money, so they're putting it on a parcel. It's not a parcel tax, but it's a parcel something. Is it possible that our energy things will go down, that we'll set up something that we can't fund?
I mean, I think this is a little different than that because it's, you know, I was just at the hazardous waste site this weekend. You have to maintain a facility whether you've got full volume or half volume. It's sort of a fixed number. What we're proposing are initiatives that will probably foster us reaching our goal. So that's kind of the beauty of it in our mind. If our goal ends up with declining revenues, then we've done our job. We were talking a lot about VMT reduction a minute ago, but the other key area that the Climate Action Plan has addressed, and we think there's a lot of work to do, is on education for home conservation. This is not enough money to fund us to put solar on our roofs, but this might bring us the ability to do a really strong education campaign about what all of us can do in our houses to go to the next level of conservation, reduced consumption. So again, to us, this was the beauty of this idea, was if we do it well, we'll be sort of taxing ourselves out of business,
Right.
in a way.
We were also hoping that PG&E would be able to split that, so the way that it was taxed, so it would be on natural gas rather than electricity to drive a change in behavior. They're not able to do that now. We're hoping in the future that they are able to do that, because then you have the double effect of this.
The rest of what I have here are sort of comments, which maybe when it comes back to us, I'd make, but I could make them now, which is, an email went out, I think it was today, that went out to all Carbon Neutral Albany about, I think it was Severin Bernstein's idea that California should be focusing on education. And it's not really the reduction of our greenhouse gas, it's what we produce in technology and education things that are going to be the big benefit to the planet. If Albany cuts its greenhouse gas emissions by 26%, if we cut it to zero, we're still doomed if nothing else happens on the planet. So,
right.
What we, in the sense of how we should spend this money, it seems to me we should be spending it in ways that create things that other communities our size can take up. So that would be my 2 cents. And whether that's a mix of building materials, transportation, farming, whatever that mix is, I think it should all be in that kind of more inventive, out there stuff that could make a difference elsewhere.
Okay, members of the public, comments or questions?
Catherine Sutton, resident of Albany. I'm delighted. This is wonderful. And I saw that Transition Albany will be invited to be part of a coalition. Just for your information, the Transition US is coming up with a project which will be rolled out in all the transition communities, a kind of a neighborhood education support process where neighbors will support each other in reducing their emissions, in making their houses more effective, more efficient, and then spreading out beyond even the energy to almost every other aspect of living a sustainable life. And it's been very successful in Europe. And at the present, there's a team who is rewriting the, curriculum so that it actually fits the US. And it should be coming about in the fall. So hopefully that will be something useful.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, Council and staff. Thank you for considering this issue this evening. I'm Preston Jordan. I'm speaking for Carbon Neutral Albany. And it's wonderful that the Sustainability Committee has done this work and that it's done a projection, an inventory update and a projection that shows that Albany will meet its goal. However, there's a key assumption in that projection, which is that natural gas use, use of electricity, and vehicle miles traveled do not increase. And the projection is not from where we are today, it's from when the data is available, and that data is available in 2011, 2012, depending on the category. So it's an 8-year projection. It's not a 6 or a 5-year projection. It's a pretty long projection, and so there's some risk that some of those might increase if we don't take more vigorous action. As I mentioned in the email that some of you might have had a chance to read, I apologize, I was only able to send it yesterday, that there's also the issue that a lot of what Albany has achieved so far is in some senses accidental. So from 2006 to 2008, the commercial sector of natural gas use dropped by almost 25%. And we struggled for a long time trying to understand why that happened. We originally thought maybe it was University Village, but the facts didn't line up there for that. Eventually, the best answer seemed to be that it was Western Forge and Flange moving out, which you know well because you're, I think, considering buying that property, or maybe have already bought it for the public, or for the corporation yard, I believe. And you know, there's articles indicating that they had gas-fired forges there, you know, and those are extremely energy-intensive devices. So no doubt Albany will take credit for that business leaving, but I think that leaves a little bit of a credibility gap because that's a big part of how we're meeting our goal. And so we would like to see the city do more, and we think passing this tax in and of itself would present some leadership to the rest of the state and to the rest of the country and the rest of the world. And as far as what the money could be used on, the city has developed a paint and sign plan for actually implementing the cycling network that's called for in the active transportation plan, and that could certainly use some funding to implement that more quickly.
You want to bring your comments to a close?
Thank you. A lot of the measures that have the largest quantified greenhouse pollution reductions have not been implemented. And one of them, going to Councilmember Barnes' question, is what's called a residential energy conservation ordinance. It's kind of like our sewer lateral ordinance in that it requires, when a property changes hands, that property meets certain minimum energy efficiencies. And so implementation of that in ordinance could do a lot to change the energy picture in Albany, but it hasn't been implemented yet, and we don't see signs of it being implemented. And this could pay for staff time to actually develop that ordinance, bring it in front of you, and hopefully get it implemented so we can start to build in those gains. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. As Councilmember Barnes said, there's a lot of good ideas that could come out of this, but without a focus, with just the idea that you could do a lot of things, I don't see how you can put it on the ballot and go before the voters with sort of a smorgasbord of possibilities. I don't think people are going to vote for that. I think that you need to have some very key points that you're going to use the money for. And I think if we're meeting the goal, that it's going to be a really hard sell for people to understand why we need to do this. So you might want to clarify that a little bit more. Again, I think maybe it was Councilmember Maas who said that the school district looks like they're going out for a parcel tax. And I know somebody's always going out for something, but keep that in mind. And my last point is for you to give strong direction to the Sustainability Committee as far as their role in something like putting a measure on the ballot, that we keep it separate, that the government doesn't run the ballot measure campaign, and that they get really good direction on how to do that, or how not to do that even more specifically. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Carol O'Keefe. I'm an Albany resident. I wanted to begin by thanking the many people who've done a ton of work on this. I'm not sure that came through in all of the prior comments or the reports, but I remember Nicole Almaguer starting pretty much as soon as the cap was approved. She got some sort of a grant, I think, to put in more energy efficient street lighting. And I think the city and planning and zoning had been even a little bit ahead of that curve with the energy efficiency requirements for construction and upgrades. And the city, I know when it redid this building, incorporated a lot of improvements. So I think actually a lot has been done. And echoing Peggy's comment, I keep coming up against the fact that even taking into account Belmont Village in reasonably anticipated new construction, we're still going to meet the council's goal. So I think you need to have a really, really good explanation for the voters. And it can't be something, there was a mention in one of the reports, establishing a dedicated fund for CAP implementation can help the city reach the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions 25% below 2004 by 2020. It's on target to do that. And of course something could be different. I mean, you make your best projections, but it's very clear that those are the current projections, and I think it's going to be very difficult to sell the voters on something that sort of acts like we're going to have trouble making it when the documentation says otherwise. If you do go ahead with this, I would want you to get very clear information, not only what specific actions, but how much they would cost and how much difference they would make. So how many hundreds of thousands of dollars are we going to spend for however much more reduction? Because I think that that would be very important information that the voters would be interested in knowing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Okay, back to the council. Marge, you had some comments.
Yeah, well, I know that the Sustainability Committee and Max Wee, who's, I think, current chair, is that right? Have been passionate about this, and we did put them off 2 years or whatever it was ago. My feeling right now is that even though the school district may or may not, we don't really know what they're going to do, put something on the ballot, this is really important stuff. And I feel like we really need to do something, and we need to prove that we are interested and dedicated to doing something. So I think this is a great idea in the sense that we need to find money, and we have not come up with money from the city. If there was a way to figure out what the school district is doing, that's one thing. But on the other hand, you know, we put a sales tax with lots of different categories on it, it passed. I think that the committee would have lots of good ideas, more than we could even pay for, of what we might want to fund. And I think if people in this community understand that, you know, we're in big trouble, that they would be willing to come out and vote for this. If it's 2/3, that is harder, we know that. On the other hand, if you don't get 2/3 the first time, then you have another chance, and once you see it on the ballot, maybe the next time they vote for it anyway. I don't know. I feel like if you don't make an effort, then you're never going to get there. So that's where I'm heading right now. And it may not be good for the school district, I'm not sure. But I don't know what they're going to do anyway. If there was a way to figure that out with the city, maybe it would be, you know, they get this year and we get something next year. But I just don't, I feel that this is more important to get it started. So that's where I'm coming from right now.
Okay, Michael?
I actually have a quick clarification. If we just impose this tax and put it in a general fund, we would only need a 50% vote. Is that correct? You wouldn't need a supermajority.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, that's right. If the money is not earmarked for a specific purpose, then it's classified as a general tax, and it requires a majority vote. If it is earmarked for specific purposes, then it's a special tax requiring a 2/3 vote.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Peter, anything?
That's most interesting. So, I mean, the idea that we could conceivably put this on, it gets passed by a majority vote, and then council could choose where we want to spend it.
The problem is you have to explain the tax.
You know, I made those previous comments. I agree with what Carol and Peggy were saying. I think it really is important if you're going to get this passed, is that it needs to be defined. There needs to be goals. There needs to be some kind of measurement standard in there also. And if it's too general, it might be a tough spell, particularly if we're going against the school district $200 a year parcel and whatever waste management is up to, and I'm on the board, I'm not quite sure at this point. I would like to see this develop more to the point that we could, you know, find something to put on the ballot, and I'd be fine with doing this in 2014. And again, this idea that we're going to have to transition between, you know, this may be a private group, which I think is coming up on our next item here, essentially. You know, that could be the group that takes over running this campaign. So.
Okay. Clarification from the city attorney. Are there legal parameters here about this being a committee or commission, you know, that we've organized from the city of Albany, and they're generating a ballot measure?
No, not at this point. The city has the authority to expend public resources to evaluate potential ballot measures, even to do polling. Once you make a decision to put something on the ballot, your options are more limited. The city can't use public resources, whether it's city hall space or equipment or staff time or money to advocate passage or defeat of a ballot measure. So once it goes onto the ballot, then anything the city generates has to be essentially neutral and objective information for the voters.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion?
I could try to make one. This is the, let's see here. Well, we wanted to give direction. It says, staff recommendation that we review the Climate Action Plan funding proposal, which, that's the UTT, no, UUT. And I would recommend that we proceed with trying to figure out a way what this would entail, which would be more specificity as to what we would spend the money on. Go back to the committee and come up with something. Also, find a timeline that you would be finished with that in time to put it on the ballot if that ends up being something that we would want to do. I don't know, is that specific enough?
Do we need a motion on this?
Is it just a?
It doesn't read like we need a motion
We
per se. does it?
review and then provide direction to staff and the Sustainability Committee. So actually, what Marge is proposing is a direction to the Sustainability Committee in terms of asking for more specificity. I think we also we have this general person's agreement about not putting measures on the ballot at the same time that the school district is placing something before the voters. Is there some way we can check and see, would that be through you,
To the
city
extent they
manager?
know.
Is there a member of the school district in the House?
Sure.
Please come to the podium. All right, so what we're looking at the moment is what Marge is proposing about the committee coming back with more specifics about how the money, the $200,000 might be used. And then in terms of our general person
Alan
agreement.
Maris, member of the Albany Unified School District Board of Education, speaking for myself. If you want some insight as to how serious the school district is about putting a parcel tax on in November, we're having a board conversation or a workshop tomorrow here at 5:45 to discuss that. We have a parcel tax committee which will be involved in that conversation, as well as school board members, so you can, I think, get a sense of how serious the school district is about a parcel tax in November by tuning into that.
Are you attending that meeting?
It's a board meeting, so I will be
You will be
attending
there.
that meeting. Yeah.
Would you be able to report back to the Sustainability Committee about the results of that meeting?
I can, but getting the information firsthand is probably the best way to, and we will be televised. It'll be on KALB, as most board meetings are.
Okay, I'm just asking for
I
one
can
person
do
to
that,
be
but I
responsible.
think you get a much clearer, broader, in-depth sense of it if you listen to it yourself.
Well, let's ask for both. We'll have
Sure,
people
that's
view,
fine. I'll
and
do
then
what
if
I
you would
can.
get back to Tom and
Sure.
Janet about that,
Tom and I
too.
are old friends.
Good, to get back to your old friends. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Okay, so two parts then. What Marge proposed about more specificity about the how the $200,000 would be used, and then hearing what the school district's plans are, so we can do some coordination. Is there anything more on this?
Well, I feel like, yeah, we may have a gentleman's agreement, but.
General persons.
General what?
General persons agreement.
There's some general persons, okay. But again, if this doesn't go on the ballot in this year, then I think we need to really consider seriously as soon as possible in some other way, because with all that we are saying and doing or not doing as a city, even though we're supposedly on goal to meet our whatever those are, it's not enough. So you set up a goal, and then you get these other reports that are worse and worse and worse. So it almost doesn't matter if we meet our goals that we set up like 8 years ago, whatever it was. That's not good enough. And so I'm distressed that we have to wait for the school district, in a sense, even though you're important, and God knows I love the school district. But this is important too. So I'm hoping that we can find a way to either figure that out. $1.54 doesn't, or 74 doesn't seem like a whole lot of money to worry about in terms of giving it a shot. So I'd like to see us make a real effort.
So when is your next meeting? I'm thinking, should we either have a report back in our next meeting in April or the first meeting of May to the city council?
We were told, it's April 16th, and we were told that, I guess you're considering a number of these measures in June. That's how the staff report was written.
So if we asked for a report back in our next meeting in April, that would be workable?
There's a logistical problem for us in preparing an agenda packet for you. The meeting is Wednesday night, but our packets go out Wednesday morning.
So if we asked for it the first meeting of May,
That would be more
work.
practical for us.
So
Thank
let's aim for that. Good. All right. Thanks, everybody, for coordinating on this. Next item.
Sustainability Committee analysis of option to fund implementation of Albany Climate Action Plan. Staff recommendation that the council review, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong item. Sustainability Committee proposal for establishment of the Green Coalition meeting to discuss climate action plan outreach strategy. Staff recommendation that the council, one, review the outreach proposal submitted to City Council by City Sustainability Committee, and two, provide direction to staff and the Sustainability Committee regarding CAP outreach.
The Sustainability Committee has another proposal for you this evening to create a coalition of local environmental advocacy groups to provide community outreach for Albany's climate action plan. This is in addition to outreach that's done both by city staff and by the Sustainability Committee. If council wants to proceed with this coalition, we will provide a meeting space and a staff time for the first meeting. But there's some question to what happens after that. It looks like Tom Cooper will be presenting this to you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and council members. So this is actually very much related to the previous item in terms of, and some of your comments to that we need to mobilize the citizens of Albany, because if we do nothing, we're all in trouble as a city and as a country and as a planet. What we have to do is educate folks in our community and the broader community about ways of changing lifestyle, changing behavior, so that we can reduce our emissions. And as you know, currently the Sustainability Committee, the outreach that we do is mostly concentrated around the Arts and Green Festival this year on May 4th. But we really felt like we needed to do a lot more, and we've had discussions over the years about this. What else should we be doing? We are blessed as a city with many community organizations. And what we came up with was an idea of gathering those groups that are interested in the welfare of the city, which most of them are, and trying to focus an outreach effort around changing behaviors within the city, educating people to what is available in terms of making your home more energy efficient, changing the way that people drive, getting them to drive less. And one of the concepts behind this too would be that this coalition would define what its mission would be, but it's we're trying to keep it within the framework of the Climate Action Plan to focus on those goals. And so one potential focus of this coalition could be running the campaign. We can't speak to what it would be because it's going to be up to the coalition, but this is one of our ideas would be that one of the first things that the coalition would do is take on the campaign around the UUT, organizing within the city, and then as that experiencing grows, that lends itself to a lot of other educational and outreach opportunities within the city, because we're using the focus of passing the tax to talk about what people should be doing and what's available to them and how we would spend the money generated from that tax. So we think that this concept has many, many benefits in terms of building on what already exists in Albany and bringing folks together around some common issues that many of them are already working on. And the biggest concern that we believe the staff has around this has to do with staffing this kind of a coalition. So what we've come up with is that we would provide a facilitator pro bono, that we would do as much as we could to minimize staff involvement after that first meeting. The coalition would basically run itself. We would only need a location to meet in, but the coalition would provide the infrastructure and its own staff to issue minutes and reports coming out of the coalition. So we wouldn't be relying on staff, which we fully recognize is overburdened currently.
Okay, hold on, let's see if there are any questions. Marge first.
Well, actually, it almost seems like you could carry this on without the city in some ways. And I really feel like we can't do it all, and to have a community group in some ways is really great in the sense of reaching out, because that's who they're going to listen to in the end. I mean, we can only, like I say, we can only do so much, and then sometimes there's distrust, and then you're this, and you're, uptight about, what the city can do or can't do. But I think it's, to me, it sounds to me like a really great idea to get started to actually do the community things that we can't always do from this point of view.
Okay, Michael?
Well, I just want to second that. I'm looking at the physical impact section of the staff report, and it says the city will provide meeting space and staff time for the first meeting. If the group were to continue, significant staff time would be required to support the meetings. We just sunsetted the waterfront committee, and one of the justifications for doing that was that our staff was overburdened. So I'd have a hard time, just committing the staff to a new issue when, like Marge, I'm a little unclear as to what our role would be in it. I had that question too about the film festival. I'm like, why isn't that a nonprofit organization? So maybe some sort of nonprofit organization would be a better vehicle in this case as well.
Okay, Peter?
Yeah, there was in the back of my mind, there was also a little bit confusing. We're sort of setting up a private organization, but we're going to use maybe a little bit of staff time, but primarily a facility, the community center or Veterans Hall or someplace that we can donate. I think it's fine, and I see a lot of possibilities that can come out of this. I really like the idea of bringing all these kind of different groups in to talk about that, because we are a whole bunch of different factions and groups in this town. I would suggest bring in some that I don't see on the list, architects, builders, electricians. They're actually hands-on with a lot of these building energy issues, and probably have a lot of great ideas that can help us meet the goals. And yet you've talked about, or the report talks about, if you get too many, then it's the too many cooks, can kind of dilute the soup in some way. So I'm not sure how you balance that all out, but given how little the city is going to contribute to this, I think it's a fine idea. And then at some point, you may be needing to kind of spin off into a more, separate organization, not an official city-sponsored thing.
Okay, members of the public. Okay, Preston?
Yeah.
I'll just say a few words as a member of some of these organizations. There haven't been conversations in the organizations about this idea, at least Carbon Neutral Albany and Albany Strollers and Rollers, to my knowledge, so I'm just speaking as an individual. I think it would be interesting to have one meeting to see, if there's some sort of common set of goals that could be facilitated out of that. It's not obvious to me that would exist, because each organization kind of has its mission and does its thing and it tries to stay somewhat narrowly focused. But I think it's worth a shot. You can always be surprised when you have a good facilitator in the room what can come out of it. So it's worth the conversation, I think. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Catherine?
Catherine Sutton. I already kind of said my piece about this, and we haven't talked about this within Transition to Albany either. But it is absolutely our goal. It's absolutely the whole thing is what we exist for, and I think it's wonderful that it's coming from the Sustainability Committee, and very much look forward to working with them.
Thank you. Okay, back to the City Council for direction.
I don't know what else to say except keep at it and try to figure out how you want to do this. I suppose, and again, I think, with all the people together there, you're going to be more in charge of you than we are in some ways. I mean, we can maybe do a launch, but it does seem to me like the community group can almost get as much or more done than what we would do if we were organizing it. So, and I kind of see you as like this group that Michael talked about, getting launched and working with the other groups. And I imagine there'll be a lot of things you'll come up with that we'll want to do as a city. But yeah, the members of the community are really the ones that are going to be driving this, because you're the ones that are going to be the effective change agents, as I see it.
I'm having two concerns. The first is that I feel like we should make it clear that staff would be involved in the first meeting only, and whether that would be acceptable, to you, and whether that's also something members of the council agree with, just in terms of what we've said about conservation of staff time. And then the second thing is that I'm worried about a kind of confused set of boundaries about, what is city-sponsored and what is community-sponsored, and will that start getting murky in some way? And is that my own worry unnecessarily, or do people on the council have other thoughts about that? I mean, we're saying after that first meeting that we would provide space. I mean, I guess that means we would offer, say, the community center, but we wouldn't receive any rent money as we do with other groups.
Maybe or may not. I don't know. It would seem like that you can create the boundaries too, depending on what comes out of your meetings. You create which areas you're going to focus on, and I would think that you could be worried, but then on the other hand, you don't know what to be worried about yet. But maybe when we see what they come up with, we'd be better able to say, well, that's not working for the city or whatever. Does that work at all?
We could ask for a report back.
How much you want us to be involved even?
Well, okay, so we say this is a great idea, you have our blessing, goodbye.
I mean, we are your advisory, we are an advisory committee, so we need your blessing at least.
And as the Sustainability Committee, as the convener and organizer of it, we would be reporting through our committee on the progress. So we would be reporting back to you.
Yeah, there would be reports.
So then we probably need some boundaries then on some way. But.
Yeah.
Jeff and I have talked about this, and I think a commitment on his part or Claire's part to be at the first meeting to help them develop the mission that corresponds with the climate action plan, so therefore it sort of runs along a document that we already have in place is a good idea. How often they meet needs to be discussed. I think there's been a lot of, it's at the staff level anyway, whether it would be a monthly, a quarterly, getting these other groups who meet on their own and are very involved in other things, how often they would have time to meet would also have to be a consideration from the people they've invited to be as part of their stakeholders. So I think staff being at the first meeting and helping them establish themselves in terms of goals and missions, and I know that can't always be done very effectively in one meeting, but hopefully come in with some framework that'll make that a productive first meeting, and then have them kind of let loose, report back to sustainability, and see how it goes from there. Okay. I think a commitment from staff for the first meeting would be fine.
Would it stretch the city to offer up the community center or some room at the community center for meetings in the future? Is that possible?
No, I don't. I think that's completely possible. It would only require them to be very organized, because the rooms fill up very quickly. Yeah. So depending on A, how many people they'd need to provide space for, and B, planning far enough ahead so that they could reserve the facilities.
And there's other rooms, it's not besides that one. Okay. And you may decide that the Sustainability Committee will back out at some point. Maybe you get it organized and then it works better some other way. I don't know.
Okay. Carol, do you want to come up?
How will the Brown Act work with this?
Well, if it's a city-appointed committee, then in all likelihood, it would be subject to the Brown Act. So I'm not sure what the composition is going to be of this group, but if it wouldn't be a subcommittee of the council, so it would be just another group that you create. So, yeah.
People would have to have minutes
You have to
and
have
public
minutes and
notices
post-notices,
and all
yeah,
the
that's
things
stuff.
that we go through with public meetings.
So we would do that, certainly for the first meeting, because presumably a quorum of the Sustainability Committee would be present. So we'd have the public notice at 72 hours. It has to be in an accessible location and so forth. And then beyond that, depending on how it's organized, we would have to consider that. And yeah, if a quorum of the Sustainability Committee continues to meet on a regular basis, talk about sustainability policies, even if we're not involved physically in the meeting, we have to at least do the posting of the notice.
The other comment I would add, follow up to my earlier comments, if this were to morph into a campaign committee, then obviously the city could not be sponsoring the group.
Okay. So there's a lot of consultation that's going to be involved in your work here, naturally. Okay, so that's enough direction then in terms of what we're thinking and what you're thinking? Good. Okay, thank you.
You guys have put in tons of time and effort. I just really amazed. Thankful.
Okay, item 9-4.
Contract with Marin Clean Energy to conduct membership analysis. Staff recommendation that council authorize the city manager to sign the attached contract with Marin Clean Energy to conduct a membership analysis.
The action before council is to consider entering into an $18,000 contract with Marin Clean Energy, also known as MCE, to conduct a membership analysis to join MCE's Community Choice Aggregation Program. Just as some background, Community Choice Aggregation, or CCA, allows public agencies to procure electric power on behalf of customers. Energy transmission, distribution, repair, customer service, and billing would all still go through PG&E. Customers would have a choice to continue to purchase power directly from PG&E by opting out of the CCA, and customers who receive electricity from the CCA are still entitled to PG&E's special pricing, efficiency programs, and rebates. Joining MCE would provide Albany residents with more electricity options and would also provide them with more energy efficiency and renewable incentive programs, and would ultimately reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Albany. The contract is required for MCE to conduct a membership analysis, which would determine what impact Albany would have on MCE's rates and emissions factor, and this information will help both MCE and Albany make an informed decision as to whether Albany should join their JPA. The city has received a $15,000 grant from the World Wildlife Fund to help fund this analysis, and the remaining $3,000, if needed, will be absorbed by the existing community development budget allocation. Just to mention something that's not in the staff report, there are two other potential options for CCA other than the Marin model, but neither of them is really up and running yet. Sonoma Clean Power is starting to serve their own customers in Sonoma in May, and they're not quite ready to discuss other jurisdictions joining until they go through that rollout process. Very recently, we've heard that Alameda County is also interested in a CCA. The unincorporated areas of the county are talking about starting up a feasibility study. From what we know, it's unclear on the timing of that or any financial obligation that would be required from interested jurisdictions, but traditionally it's taken several years and a significant investment for a CCA to start running from scratch. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Also, Dawn Weiss, Executive Officer of MCE, is here as well if you have questions for her.
I have a question. There's on the end of the financial impact, it says Richmond has saved 1% to 2%, and Albany would save about $1,500. So that doesn't seem like a whole lot of money. So where is the advantage? It's mainly in the green energy and the lowering the emissions. Is that the pros?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the biggest pro is really reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's kind of the biggest bang for the buck in the climate action plan. That's why the Sustainability Committee has made it a priority the past few years to analyze it. Yeah, it's in the greenhouse gas emissions and also the energy efficiency programs and rebates offered by MCE.
Michael, any questions?
What happens if we vote no? What happens to the grant?
We would return the grant to World Wildlife Foundation.
Okay. Peter?
So we're just approving a study at this point. We're not entering into an actual agreement. But if we were to enter into an agreement, how long do those agreements usually go? I mean,
I'm not sure if you want to answer that, but my sense is a long time.
a long time. Okay.
Hi, I'm Dawn Wise with MCE. So the study takes about 2 months. It's a membership study, and 1 month of that is spent requesting data. We request data from PG&E. It would be all of the usage data for the customers in your community, and we would take that data and do the analysis using it. It takes PG&E 3 to 4 weeks to get that data back to us, and then it takes us 2 to 3 weeks to do the analysis and prepare the results of the study. And the study is really intended to ensure that adding the new community load to our existing jurisdiction wouldn't have a detrimental impact on our existing rates, but would be a net positive rather than net negative. So that's really the purpose of the analysis. It's very quantitative. We also, in that analysis, will produce results that show how much more renewable energy will be coming online as a result of the increase in customer usage. And we also show what the greenhouse gas reductions would be expected to be with the increase in usage. Just to give you an example, our most recent GHG emissions report was just approved by our board last week. And the findings were that our emissions rate is 19% lower than PG&E's emissions rate. And for customers that choose our deep green product, which is 100% renewable, the emissions rate is 0.
I think you haven't answered Peter's question about the commitment.
That's all great, but I'm wondering if we, as the City of Albany, enters into an agreement, how long are we connected up with MCE under normal circumstances?
Yeah, well, the decision to join MCE is really a long-term commitment. You would become part of the MCE governing body, and there's not a plan for departure. It's something we enter into long-term contracts to procure for all of the customers at one time. So it's kind of
it's not like a 5-year contract or a 10-year contract?
No.
And there's no, this has not brought legal problems, that this is so vague?
No, well, it's not vague. It's a local government agency. We're a JPA, a Joint Powers Authority, and each member agency, every city and town that's a member of our agency, is a part of the governing board. So the governing board, the members could choose to not take power from the agency for their municipal facilities. They could also choose to not participate in board meetings, but the withdrawal of their customer base isn't something that's factored into the JPA agreement, because if there was if that was something that was a part of the organization, it would make it difficult or impossible to enter into long-term power supply agreements. We really need to know what the customer base is going to be in the long term in order to have economies of scale and enter into, many of our agreements are 25-year agreements for renewable supply. And if we're only entering into 5-year agreements, then the economics go away. Right now, our rates are lower and our power is greener, and that's because we enter into long-term commitments.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. No, I think that's good for what I have.
Members of the public, questions?
So this is just the E part of PG&E, is it?
We're not affiliated directly with PG&E, but we partner with them too.
So it's just for electricity, it's not for gas? Well, I would say that if we weren't producing all the electricity we needed at my house, this would be definitely something I'd be interested in, because you can go for a deep green choice and have all your electricity be completely zero emissions. Whereas at the moment with PG&E, they have their own decision about how much is this and how much is that. So I think it's a good idea. And I wanted to know about the, is it Clean Jobs, Clean Energy, the other one in Oakland? Did you look at that one seriously?
Yes. It's a, what's it called? Can you go to the local Clean Alliance, which is not.
You may want to, for people who are watching this on.
Sorry. Yes, we had a presentation from the local Clean Energy Alliance out of Oakland, and we agreed with their approach, and there were a lot of good things they said, but they are very, very far from being at the stage that Marin Clean Energy is. So what the Sustainability Committee was faced with is, if we want to do something now, rather than wait and see excuse me, what the county develops or what Sonoma develops, we don't know how long that would be. That could be several years. So it was a question of do something now or wait and see if there's something better.
Okay, thank you. Other comments from the public?
Good evening, Vice Mayor Weil. My name is Tom Kelly and members of the City Council. Until recently, I was the co-chair of the Berkeley Climate Action Coalition Community Choice Energy Working Group. This is a group that was established by the City of Berkeley in conjunction with the Ecology Center to further our city's climate action plan goals. For the last 3 years, I've been working with my colleagues to try and facilitate the City of Berkeley's entry into a community choice program. And as you may recall, in 2012, we had our first opportunity to really have an agency consider it when we made this proposal to East Bay Mud. They subsequently decided not to pursue it. But subsequent to that, we actually started talking to the Alameda County Board of Supervisors, first through their staff, but several months ago I actually made contact with Supervisor Haggerty, who has now expressed a very serious interest in pursuing community choice in Alameda County. He's directed his staff to bring a resolution to the full board within this month or early next month that would basically give the staff direction to begin working on this, to begin to pull load data for the unincorporated areas of the county, which is the way it basically happened in Sonoma. And our role in that, too, is then to begin to bring in other cities to join the county in that request to pull that data, so that we essentially submit a single application for whichever cities are willing to participate. So we think that Berkeley is going to join that process. We're hopeful that cities like Hayward and Dublin, who've expressed an interest in this, will join us in that effort. The cost is very minimal because it'll be a single application that's made for that, for all the jurisdictions that are involved. And it's our feeling that once that process begins, and we will get to the point where the county does a feasibility study for all the cities in that program. It's true, it takes a little bit longer to do that, but the experiences in Marin and Sonoma have actually shortened that period of time. We all know that it's feasible. Marin is doing it successfully. Sonoma's done their feasibility study. A feasibility study done for Alameda County is actually going to be a much shorter process than both Marin and Sonoma have experienced. So basically, I'm not here to encourage you not to join MCE at some point, but I am encouraging you to postpone your vote on this until we get some direction from Alameda County, which should occur in the next few weeks, to see which direction they're going to take.
Want to just bring your comments to a close?
Yeah. In my view, an Alameda County Community Choice Program would reflect Albany's values as a member of this county. That's not to say that the values in Marin are different, or Sonoma, that they aren't better or worse, but I mean, You have a history here. You have relationships with other organizations. We have an existing JPA that may be the agency that's set up to do this. So that's basically my request of you, that you just give it a couple of weeks until we see where this goes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Carol O'Keefe, Albany resident. Again, you all are projecting meeting your goal by 2022, which it would be wonderful to do more, but I think that reality gives you the grounding to be very sure what you're doing before you even go ahead and do this membership study. I have to confess, I don't particularly like the model of community choice aggregation. Nothing personal about the individual operations, but I think we'd all be a lot better off if PG&E were regulated a hell of a lot more tightly, and every community could have people who could opt in to deep green or light green or, you know, whatever they want. It isn't just the communities where there's an interest and an ability to pay for a membership thing. The other advantage that I would see, echoing the prior speaker, of taking at least a little bit more time to make this decision, is to see if there is some other option where there's more likely to be more actual construction of energy building operations. I thought that was supposed to be part of the community choice aggregations, that they would actually increase the amount of energy infrastructure. I see very little of that with MCE. Perhaps it's just a timing thing. The other concern I have that I think you all should consider is the staff workload that would be associated if you decided to go with this. I think that was mentioned in the staff report as an issue of what it would take for the staff to do if it rolled out. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Thank you again for considering this issue this evening, Council. It's been quite the evening for looking at greenhouse pollution and how to reduce it. And I want to thank Mr. Kelly for coming and explaining the situation with the county. That provided me a lot more information than I had before. And so it seems like that's more viable than I previously understood, and I think it would be interesting to see what vote is taken over the next few weeks. I don't know if the grant conditions provide that flexibility or if there's some deadline where it needs to be used now, and I don't know if the grant has to be used for a feasibility study with MCE, or maybe there's enough time that it could be used to provide a feasibility study with the county. In general, with regard to CCAs, I appreciate that they're providing competition. We had the vision of competition in the power market, as you may recall, years ago, that completely fell apart. And my family used, I think, Green Mountain at that time, which we were very excited about, and then had to fall back to PG&E. And I think if you look at PG&E's behavior now, you can see that the competition is, circumstantially at least, appears to be having an effect on what they're doing. I mean, their greenhouse pollution factors are reducing rapidly because I think they see the threat. They're actually going to come out, I believe the plan is to come out with a 0% greenhouse pollution product because they see the threat there. So to me, that's the benefit of having the CCA there, is it's also pushing PG&E as well as being a better option in and of itself. We're getting some of the benefit of that competition without being in a CCA, but I think that's what's called free riding, which is we're getting a benefit without really stepping up and participating. So whichever way you decide to go, I would encourage you to keep the progress on this going with alacrity, because I think we really need it. And with regard to the projections that's come up again, that I think it might be unfortunate the way that was done by the Sustainability Committee, because they're projecting that if there's no increase in power usage and there's no increase in vehicle miles traveled, we'll just barely make our target. And there seems to be a sort of an assumption developing like, oh, we're going to make our target. Well, no, you have to keep those assumptions in mind. And I guess thinking about a campaign, since I'd probably be a volunteer involved in that, I can already see having to deal with that issue, that we're only going to make the target if we hold the line. And it's not inevitable that we will hold the line, even though we have over the last few years. But again, commercial natural gas use plummeted because that one company left. So the threat is there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay.
I just wanted to add one other piece of information that might be helpful as you're kind of weighing the timing. The study that we would be entering into for you all is not a commitment to join our the MCE program. That comes later. After the study results are in, then there's an opportunity for your council to determine if you want to pass the resolution and ordinance to go forward with the CCA program. Based on what we've seen with the other requests, we have requests in from San Pablo and a request actually going to the council in the city of El Cerrito on April 22nd. We anticipate that those will be coming back to their councils for a final decision around the June timeframe. So that's kind of what we'd be looking at.
Thank you. Okay. Clarification before we discuss this on the city council. Is there a time limit on our grant?
I'll let Claire answer that. I think we've got a little bit of room, but she knows the details.
Yeah, I think we have some wiggle room at least through the summer on the grant. I'd have to figure out exactly when that is, but I think there is. I think we could hold off for a while. The grant, unfortunately, is only for the MCE analysis because of the way that the county analysis is different. I asked the World Wildlife Fund, and they said they'd rescind the grant if we refuse to do the membership analysis with MCE.
I see. Okay, that's helpful. Yes.
A question. With the information that we get out of this study, could that be applicable or useful if we're considering another CCA county or otherwise? I mean, is that information that's only pertinent to MCE, or?
It would be an analysis of Albany's load, so in that way I assume that it would be relevant, but I haven't seen one, so you may have to comment on that.
It would really only be tied to MCE, so we would be taking your load and plugging it into MCE's economic model and determining if it fits. So it wouldn't be an independent analysis just for Albany to look at forming its own CCA. That would be an entirely different set of economics.
Okay.
For Albany to join another county CCA, that would be another entirely unknown set of economics.
Right. You want to repeat that for people at home?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be relevant for Albany to go it alone, the information that MCE gathers. There's also an analysis of the energy market. Would that be something that we would have access to that might be relevant to us? Do you want to comment?
So the information that we use for market costs is information that we have access to because we're a member of some market organizations. We can kind of see real-time prices. And it changes day to day. So, we can provide you with the end result, but that day-to-day information isn't something that is easily shared.
Yeah, so the gist of this is that we really can't use this when we're considering another community choice aggregation entity. The numbers really fit more with just Marin.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest piece, the power supply costs are relatively easy to guesstimate, and I anticipate that piece would be similar with both analysis. But what would be different really is the startup costs. The feasibility study itself has a cost, but then also there's a big working capital need to launch the agency. In our case, it was about $5 million, 2.5 million in the first year, and then a couple million after that. I think in Sonoma County it was a little higher because they have a bigger load to serve, but that has to get factored into the economics at the beginning.
Good, thank you. Okay, back to City Council for recommendation.
So, it seems to me that if this grant is only good for the MCE, that at some point, whether it's tonight or not, that we should at least take advantage of it. So I'll make a blank. Recommend that the council authorize the city manager to sign the attached contract with Marin Clean Energy to conduct a membership analysis.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I can second this.
Okay, vote.
We can still discuss, yes.
Sure, let's discuss.
Yeah.
I've written extensively about this on my blog. I really think CCAs are a dead model, and I cannot see voting in favor of this. There's a third option here, which is to do nothing, because you can get, soon you'll be able to get 100% green energy from PG&E. There are, PG&E's building big, giant solar, thermal, and photovoltaic plants in the desert. I just think there's nothing here for us in the long run, or for that matter, look, if we want 100% green energy, we could just hire a REC broker, RECs or renewable energy certificates. That's pretty much how people get to 100% green energy. You buy these certificates on the market. There's a market. The market does not work, but it's a market. That's according to Severin Bornstein at UC Berkeley, who I actually converse with via email fairly often. But I can see how CCAs had an appeal several years ago when, sticking it to PG&E was kind of what people wanted to do. But the reality is, although PG&E is privately owned, it's not a public utility. It is not unregulated. It is regulated. And the state legislature is driving pretty hard to improve, the state, the carbon efficiency, if you will, of the state's energy infrastructure. And one of the reasons it's gotten cleaner is because these modern new combined cycle gas turbines are incredibly efficient. And coal power plants are being phased out all over the country as natural gas gets cheaper and more abundant. So I don't see any reason to jump into this, whether it's because you want to see what happens with Alameda County or whether you want to see what happens with PG&E's 100% green plan. To me, there's just really no advantage in taking this step. On the other hand, if we're just going to be spending, World Wildlife Fund's money, I suppose you could argue that cuts our downside, but maybe WWF could do something else with the money.
Any other comments?
Yeah, given that it is grant funding for this study, primarily, a very small amount of city money, and it's not a commitment. It seems to me more in the realm at this point of just, we're information gathering. And who knows, one of the arguments for the CCAs is that it is, in fact, what's helping to push PG&E into becoming greener. It may also, doing this study may help push Alameda County into getting their act together if they're going to be doing a CCA. So it seems the amount of money that the city is actually committing is fairly marginal for this study. So I don't have a problem with proceeding with this at this point. We still haven't, signed our name on the dotted line and said, yes, we're going with MCE.
One of my questions would be, if you delay the vote so that you don't give up the grant, because if it's a tie, then it's moot.
Right.
Would it help to delay it and make a vote later, or maybe it doesn't make any difference at that point? I don't know. You see what I'm saying with the?
Yeah, we could table.
Well, I could be okay with that too if we were talking about we're going to wait 2 weeks to see what the county does and how much momentum that has. But, if we can tell by what's the beginning of April, by the end of the month, then, yeah, maybe our first meeting in May, we could proceed.
Do you want to do that?
I hate to give up the grant, because if it's a tie vote, then the grant, because then we don't vote on it again. That's right?
I think Claire was saying it would still be available if we brought this up for, say, the first meeting of May.
Yeah.
I think you have to wait till after May, though. It's almost the end of April. Well, we're starting April, and it takes forever. So if you want to delay it, I'd say delay till the end of May, beginning of June. Is that too late?
Would the grant be available in our second meeting of May? And then our guess is that Alameda would be voting on this in 2 weeks. Today's April 7th.
Because otherwise
April
you're throwing away the
21st.
grant and we can't bring it back, then I don't think, once you voted.
So, do you want to, Jeff?
We don't have a problem if the council wants to let the Sustainability Committee discuss this at their next meeting and then report back to you as soon as we can with additional information, both get the precise timeline for the grant, which we're not worried about. We haven't had to ask that question until tonight, but we'll look into it so we know exactly how far we can go. And secondly, get some more information about the county program.
Because we're just cutting our nose off to wait for, I mean, why do that if we don't have to?
I think, some explanation of why perhaps the county program does make more sense, or MCE makes more sense. I mean, I'm a bit torn. They're both going to be JPAs, I presume. We're both going to be on their board if we do this.
Well, we don't know what the form of the county JPA. I would, one of the things that at staff level that we find attractive about MCE is they're familiar with small cities.
Yeah.
And because Marin County is made up of a lot of small cities, and they understand kind of the nuances of staff support and so forth, that when we're in a conversation with the city of Oakland and the city of Hayward and city of Dublin, all over 100,000.
Large cities, yeah.
It's a different dynamic. We do have good relationships with all those, our colleagues in the county, but we also, I think, would have good relationships with the JPA and Marin. So I'm not sure the political boundaries really make much of a difference in this case.
Right. But the example you point out that they have more experience with small cities, the fact that El Cerrito may join them, San Pablo, we have we're very connected with Berkeley in many ways, but they're also a much larger city than we are. So the pros and cons would be good to hear on this.
So we can work on that and bring something back to you. It sounds like the Sustainability Committee will be back here the first meeting in May anyhow on the other agenda items, so we can have something, try to target to get that meeting, and if we need a little bit more time, we'll let you know.
So we'll aim for that first May meeting, and then if we don't have information about what's happening with the Board of Supervisors for Alameda County, then we'll delay that to the second meeting in May. And then would you withdraw your motion?
I am going to withdraw my motion.
And
I'm fine. I will withdraw my second.
All right.
If I may, there's a third option, which is to report back to us on what PG&E is doing for their 100% green option. And in general, I think the community needs some education on what a renewable energy certificate is, and to what extent these various choices rely on renewable energy certificates.
All right, so we'll include PG&E, Alameda County, and aim for the first meeting of May, and then if we don't have information on those things, the second meeting of May.
Got it. Thank
Okay,
you.
we're all in agreement then. Ann?
Other business reports on meeting attended, announcement of events, future agenda items.
So I attended APAL, which is the Albany Police Activities League recognition dinner last weekend on Sunday. It was very nice. There were a lot of kids there and a lot of people that spend a lot of time working with children and working with activities that the children and young adults do. We do support APAL, and Chief McQuiston was very thoughtful in his remarks about and comments about how he appreciated the city of Albany supporting the Police Activities League. And Peggy McQuaid in the audience was a very active member, and to my surprise and being very proud of Anne here, who is a very, very active parent participant. And it was great to see her in another context, and know how much people in Albany spend in terms of time and effort for their kids. So it was a very nice activity and very nice gathering, and I'm really glad I went.
Thank you. Any other announcements about meetings? Okay, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.